The human envoy thought he was attending a ceremony of thanks. After surviving the jungles that had killed most outsiders, he had been invited to the alien court, a towering hall carved from living stone, lit by strands of glowing vines that hung like chandeliers. He expected a medal, maybe a toast, and then a chance to slip quietly home. Instead, the queen herself stood, her voice carrying through the chamber like rolling thunder. "You have earned a place among us. You shall be wed." The human choked on his drink. Wed? His mind raced, wondering if the translator crystal had malfunctioned. Surely they didn't mean marriage. He laughed nervously, trying to wave it off, but the hall didn't laugh with him. Instead, a hush fell, and then one figure stepped forward. Tall, regal, fierce-eyed, draped in silks woven with iridescent patterns. She smiled, not shyly, not nervously, but like a predator amused by its prey. "You will be mine," she said. The crowd erupted in cheers. The human sputtered, hands raised. Wait, hold on, I think there's been a..." But he was drowned out by chants. Warriors stomped their feet, scholars tapped their staffs, drummers pounded rhythms that shook the chamber. It wasn't a proposal, it was a proclamation. He had become the center of a ritual no human had ever witnessed, and escape was no longer an option. Still trying to process the absurdity, he managed. "So, just to clarify. One bride, right?" His hopeful smile died instantly when the queen gestured toward a dais. There, a dozen more women stepped forward, sisters, all sharing the same sharp eyes and mischievous smiles. The first grinned wider, amused by his horror. "Human, marrying me means you marry all of us, ready or not." His jaw dropped. Laughter rippled across the hall, and one sister slapped him on the back so hard he nearly fell over. Another leaned in, whispering something unintelligible before dissolving into giggles with the others. They weren't mocking him cruelly. They were testing him, watching to see if he'd crumble. The envoy rubbed his face. He had fought off venomous beasts, climbed cliffs slick with alien rain, and stared down executioners who wanted him dead. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for this. "I think I preferred the monsters," he muttered. The sisters howled with laughter, clapping like thunder. And yet, beneath the laughter, something else stirred. In their eyes, he didn't see cruelty or malice. He saw curiosity. He had been pulled into a tradition that bound him not just to one woman, but to an entire clan. It was absurd, terrifying, and overwhelming, but as their laughter mixed with his reluctant grin, he realized one thing. Running wasn't an option. This was his life now. The next morning he was dragged, ceremonially, but not gently, through the clan's stronghold. If the marriage had been a proclamation, this was the tour. Each sister seemed eager to introduce herself, and each introduction felt like its own trial. The warrior sister greeted him first, thrusting a spear into his hands and demanding a spar. He barely dodged her first strike, his protests drowned beneath the cheers of other sisters. She smirked when he stumbled, but her eyes gleamed with respect when he stubbornly got up again. The healer sister was no gentler. She hauled him into a chamber lined with glowing herbs and ordered him to drink concoctions to strengthen the bond. Most tasted like fire. One turned his tongue blue and another nearly made him faint. The healer calmly noted symptoms, scribbling observations while the human flailed like a man on fire. The sisters outside the chamber laughed so hard they nearly toppled over. Then came the trickster sister. She dragged him into a courtyard full of animals, some resembling birds, others resembling nightmares. She handed him a sack and told him to catch the feathered one. He tried. The sack caught fire. The trickster howled with laughter until tears streamed down her face. When he sat panting in defeat, she finally tossed him the feather herself, patting his head like a child. The scholar sister was worse in her own way. She led him into a towering library and asked him to read aloud ancient chants from a text so heavy it nearly crushed him. The symbols twisted, the sounds turned his throat raw, and by the time he finished one page, she nodded approvingly. "Adequate," she said, while the others clapped sarcastically. By the time the tour ended, he was covered in bruises, stains, and exhaustion. He had been speared, poisoned, tricked, and mocked in equal measure. And yet, he laughed. A wild, incredulous laugh. Because each time he failed, they laughed, too, not cruelly, but with him. For the first time since crash landing on this world, he wasn't just a stranger. He was part of something messy, loud, and alive. That night, lying on a woven mat, surrounded by snores, giggles, and the occasional spear propped nearby, he muttered, "This isn't marriage. This is adoption by chaos." From the shadows, one sister chuckled softly. "Welcome to the family." The sisters made it clear. Words alone did not make a marriage. It required proof, not just to them, but to the entire clan. And proof meant trials. The human groaned when he heard this, wondering if survival in their jungle hadn't been enough. But the sisters only smiled, mischievous as wolves. The first trial was combat, to prove you can defend us. The warrior sister donned her armor, grinning as she circled him. The human barely held a wooden staff they gave him. She lunged. Feinting, striking, taunting, he stumbled, fell, and scrambled back up, refusing to yield. By the end, he was flat on his back, gasping for air. The warrior sister offered her hand, pulling him up. "You fight poorly," she said, smirking. "But you fight honestly. That counts." The second trial was cooking. The trickster sister shoved a basket of glowing, hissing fruit at him and demanded a dish. He chopped, stirred, and prayed nothing exploded. It exploded. Twice. Smoke filled the hall, sisters coughing and laughing, while the human emerged from the haze with a charred plate. They tasted it. Paused. Then laughed even harder when one sister's skin turned briefly green. "Acceptable," the healer said, once her own coughing subsided. The third trial was music. The scholar sister explained that he must endure their songs of unity. The sisters circled him, chanting in harmonies so loud and resonant the floor vibrated. The sound hit him like a wall, rattling his bones. He staggered, covered his ears, then forced himself to stand in the center, swaying but unbroken. When it ended, he collapsed, gasping. They cheered, not because he had sung, but because he had endured. By the time the trials ended, he was a mess, battered, half-poisoned, reeking of smoke, and deaf in one ear. But he stood, raising his arms in mock victory. "Still alive," he croaked. The sisters burst into laughter, surrounding him, clapping his back, tugging his arms. They weren't testing his skill, they were testing his spirit, and to their surprise, he passed. The laughter couldn't last forever. One evening, while the human sat by a fire pit eating something that may or may not have been soup, he overheard whispers. Two sisters, their voices low but sharp, argued in the alien tongue. He caught enough through the translator crystal to understand. He's too fragile. He'll break. We can't rely on him. His stomach dropped. For the first time, he felt the gulf between their teasing and their doubt. The next morning, training drills hit harder. The warrior sister struck faster, her blows less forgiving. The healer gave him bitterer concoctions, muttering about testing resilience. Even the trickster's games turned crueler, hiding his boots in the rafters, switching his food with glowing worms. The laughter was still there, but thinner, edged with skepticism. He realized this wasn't play anymore. They wanted proof. But instead of lashing out, he leaned into it. When the warrior knocked him down, he bounced back up and quipped, "I've had rougher sparring with my grandmother." When the healer's potions burned, he grinned through the coughing and said, "Tastes like victory. Even when tricked into falling into a pond of glowing fish, he emerged with arms spread wide, shouting, "I always wanted to swim with the locals!" Slowly, the sisters' sharpness cracked. Their suspicion faded into reluctant smiles, then into outright laughter again. The human realized something crucial. They didn't actually want him to fail. They wanted him to stay, to prove he wasn't a momentary spark. And the only way to do that was through persistence. Still, he saw the tension in their eyes. Rival clans were watching, mocking this human marriage as a spectacle. Some of the sisters worried that siding with him made them look weak. The clan's unity trembled, but each night, when laughter returned to the fire circle, it stitched them back together, one joke, one spark at a time. The queen declared it was time for the Festival of Vows, a celebration where bonds were sealed before the entire clan. The human dreaded it from the moment drums echoed across the village and dancers spun ribbons of light through the air. The sisters dressed him in ceremonial robes so colorful he looked like a walking tapestry. He grumbled, they laughed, and so began the longest day of his life. First came the feasting. Alien dishes steamed with scents that nearly knocked him unconscious. He bit into one fruit so spicy his ears rang, eyes watering as he gasped, "Delicious, if you want to die." The sisters roared with laughter, pounding the table as he tried to smile through tears. When another dish started glowing on his plate, he pushed it away. "Nope, learned my lesson." Next came the dancing. He was dragged into the center, flailing as alien rhythms thundered around him. The sisters danced like fire and storm, graceful and fierce, while he shuffled awkwardly, sweat pouring down his face. But instead of mocking, the crowd cheered louder. His clumsy steps became comedy. Comedy became charm. He laughed with them, and soon even the most skeptical sisters clapped in rhythm to his ridiculous footwork. Finally came the vow. Under the twin moons, he stood surrounded by sisters, each placing a hand on his shoulder, head, or arm. Their voices rose in harmony, declaring him bound to their bond. He fumbled for words, then spoke the simplest truth. "I don't understand all your rituals. I don't even understand half of what I ate tonight. But I'll stand with you. That's a vow I can keep." The crowd erupted. Firelight blazed, ribbons of light spun overhead, and the sisters raised him on their shoulders, laughing, chanting, claiming him as their own. Rival clans glared in the shadows, but the clan itself stood united. For the first time, the human felt less like a guest and more like family. Of course, not everyone celebrated. Rival suitors, bruised in pride, marched into the festival courtyard, armored and sneering. They pointed at the human, their voices dripping venom. "This is no marriage. This is mockery. A human cannot stand where we fall." The laughter of the clan faltered, replaced with murmurs of unease. The sisters bristled, ready for a fight. The rivals demanded a duel. The human groaned. "Why is it always duels?" But before he could protest, the warrior sister tossed him a spear. "You are one of us now. You fight with us." His heart raced as the rivals stormed forward, weapons gleaming. He wasn't ready for a duel, but apparently he wasn't alone. The sisters joined him, forming a circle. The healer blocked blows with her staff. The trickster tripped one rival with a rope. The scholar hurled scrolls that hit harder than they should have. The warrior sister fought like fire, striking down challenges with each swing. And in the chaos, the human stumbled, ducked, swung wildly, yet somehow managed to knock one rival flat with sheer clumsy timing. The courtyard erupted. What should have been his humiliation turned into a spectacle of teamwork, chaos, and laughter. The sisters shouted praise, mocking the fallen suitors. The human gasped, chest heaving, and raised his spear like a champion. "Still alive!" he shouted, earning roars of approval. The rivals fled, shamed before the entire clan. The sisters surrounded him, laughing, clapping, teasing. "You fight poorly," said one. "But you fight with us," added another. And in that moment, standing shoulder to shoulder, he realized something. This wasn't just marriage, or chaos, or comedy. It was belonging. That night, after the rivals fled, the fire dimmed and the laughter softened. The sisters gathered him into a circle, their expressions no longer mischievous but grave. The eldest spoke first. "You think this marriage is tradition. It is not. It is rebellion." His brow furrowed. They explained. Their clan had been pressured by greater houses, forced to yield in politics. Choosing him, an outsider, was a gamble to break that stranglehold. He blinked. "So, this wasn't about me." The sisters exchanged glances. The trickster chuckled softly. "At first? No, you were convenient." His chest sank. But then the healer leaned forward, eyes glowing in the firelight. "But then you laughed, even when you bled, even when mocked. You laughed. Do you know how rare that is here? You made us remember what joy feels like." The realization hit him like a wave. To them, his clumsy humor wasn't weakness. It was defiance. A different kind of strength. Not the kind that crushed enemies, but the kind that lifted family. And in a society ruled by fear and rigid honor, that was revolutionary. He rubbed his neck, suddenly nervous. "So, I'm not just married. I'm a political grenade." The sisters burst into laughter again, though their eyes were sharp with truth. "Yes, human. And grenades are most useful when thrown." For the first time, he saw beyond the jokes and dances. They weren't just teasing him. They were trusting him, gambling everything on his stubborn spirit. It scared him more than monsters ever had. But when the warrior sister clasped his shoulder firm and steady, he found himself nodding. "Fine. But if we're rebelling, I want better food at least." The sisters laughed, tension breaking, and once again the fire circle rang with laughter. Yet underneath, something deeper had been sealed. He was no longer convenience. He was choice. The following week, the clan held a banquet so vast it spilled into the streets. Lanterns of glowing moss hung from rooftops, drums thundered through the night, and tables sagged beneath mountains of food. The human dreaded it, because he knew by now every banquet was a trap. He wasn't wrong. Midway through, the sisters announced the Circle of Stories, a tradition where each guest told a tale. Alien warriors boasted of hunts, scholars recited genealogies, nobles droned about their ancestors. Then all eyes turned to him. His stomach dropped. He had no epic victories, no noble lineage, just stories. He stood awkwardly, cleared his throat, and began to speak of something simple: his grandmother's farm back on Earth, the smell of soil after rain, the stubbornness of planting again after storms destroyed crops, the way she laughed even when her back ached. At first, he thought he was boring them. But as he spoke, silence spread. When he finished, the courtyard erupted, not with mockery, but with applause. The sisters beamed, clapping him on the back, shouting, "That's our husband!" Even rivals muttered, unsettled by how his plain story had stolen the room. He realized then, his uniqueness wasn't strength or cunning, it was perspective. Where they saw only conquest, he saw stubborn joy, and that had power. Later, as the banquet blurred into music and laughter, one sister whispered, "You don't even know what you did tonight." He shrugged, sipping alien wine. "Told a story." She smiled, shaking her head. "You made us remember. That's rarer than any blade." The queen herself presided over the final rite. The courtyard transformed into a stage of fire and song, banners rippling in the night, One by one, the sisters stepped forward, each placing a gift in his hands: a warrior's dagger, a healer's charm, a trickster's coin, a scholar's scroll. Each was a piece of themselves, binding him to all of them. When the last gift was given, the queen raised her staff and declared the union sealed. The human swallowed hard, looking around at the sea of glowing eyes, chanting, roaring. He had been many things since arriving on this world: prey, joke, guest. Now, impossibly, he was family. He fumbled for words, as he always did. I don't know what the future holds. Probably more bruises. Definitely more bad food. But if you'll have me, I'll laugh through all of it. The sisters cheered, lifting him high on their shoulders, the clan roaring approval. Rival clans spat from the sidelines, furious but powerless. The spectacle had become binding law. He wasn't just theirs, he was theirs forever. The night stretched long, filled with laughter, dancing, and chants of his name. He sat at the center of it, overwhelmed, exhausted, yet smiling like a fool. The sisters surrounded him, bickering playfully over who got to sit closest, who trained him hardest, who poisoned him with the worst dish. He realized their chaos was his comfort now. Later, under the twin moons, he walked with the eldest sister. She studied him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "You have no idea what you've started," she said softly. He shrugged. "I rarely do." She laughed, shaking her head, then grew serious. "But know this. You're ours now. Not just mine. Ours." He looked back at the circle of sisters still laughing around the fire, then at her. "Then I'd better be worth the trouble." For the first time since stepping into this world, he didn't feel alone. He felt like he belonged, not because he had conquered, but because he had endured, laughed, and kept standing. A husband, a brother, a spark in their storm. As the chants rose louder, he raised his cup with them, shouting, "Family, ready or not?" The sisters roared back in unison, and under alien skies, the human realized he hadn't just survived. He'd been claimed.